border, today we're diving into what looks like a silent war. A fight for influence in one of the most volatile corners of the world. So there's this shadow war, right? And it's really heating up between Pakistan and Afghanistan. We're talking cross-border strikes, casualties piling up along this old, disputed border, the Durand Line. The Taliban are even claiming they've inflicted some heavy losses and taken over dozens of Pakistani military posts. But here's where it gets really interesting. Pakistani officials are saying, hold on, this isn't just some border squabble. They're pointing the finger at a third player, someone they say is pulling the strings from the shadows and turning Afghanistan into, and I'm quoting here, a proxy of the Indian state. So that's the big explosive question we're tackling today. Is India secretly pouring fuel on this fire? Is the goal to bleed its old rival, Pakistan, and walk away with a huge strategic win? Okay, let's get into it. All right, like in any good mystery, the first thing you have to ask is, what's the motive? I mean, what could India possibly gain by stirring up trouble between Pakistan and Afghanistan? Well, it all comes down to one word: influence. And this really tells a story. Look at the difference in how everyday Afghans see these two countries. They call Indians brothers, friends, but when they talk about Pakistan, it's enemy, mistrust, even hate. This is what you'd call soft power in action. India has this incredible well of goodwill, and that's a powerful motive right there. They'd want to protect and expand that for sure. But to really get how we ended up here, we gotta go back in time. Because the crazy thing is, this chaos we're seeing today, it's the direct result of a strategy Pakistan itself put in motion years ago. They basically created the very monster they're now fighting. And it all starts with this: a line on a map, the Durand Line. Drawn by the British, it literally cut the Pashtun people in two. Afghanistan has never accepted this border. In fact, back in 1947, they were the only country to vote against Pakistan joining the UN because of it. Think about that. This is a wound that has been festering for decades. So what did Pakistan do? They used that wound. They were terrified of having a pro-India government in Kabul, so their spy agency, the ISI, came up with this strategic depth policy. When the Soviets invaded, they saw their chance. They took CIA money and used it to arm and train a whole network of militants, proxies. And yeah, that included the guys who would eventually become the Taliban. The whole point was to control Afghanistan from the inside out. But as you can probably guess, this strategy of using militants as your personal foreign policy army, it backfired. Big time. It was like they created a Frankenstein's monster, and eventually, that monster was going to turn on its creator. And then, 9/11 happened. One day that just changed everything. And suddenly, Pakistan was stuck in this impossible position. Do they side with their longtime ally, the US? Or do they stick with the very terrorists they had created and given shelter to? Talk about being caught between a rock and a hard place. When the former head of Pakistan's ISI was asked about this, about the fact that the militants he helped create were now blowing up schools and killing Pakistani soldiers, his response was just chilling. He had two words for it: collateral damage. So with the US breathing down their necks, the Pakistani army had no choice. They had to go after their old proxies. But the snakes they'd been raising in their own backyard, well, they just turned around and started biting. This is when a new group formed, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, the TTP, and their one and only goal was to wage war on Pakistan, a war that, by the way, is still going on. Okay, let's fast forward to 2021. The US just pulls out of Afghanistan. The Taliban storms back into power almost overnight. The entire geopolitical chessboard gets flipped upside down, and suddenly the stage is set for a really, really unlikely new alliance. So the Taliban is back in charge, but they're running a country that's on the verge of complete economic collapse. They are desperate for two things: money and some kind of legitimacy on the world stage. The problem? Their old friend, their patron Pakistan, was dealing with its own massive economic crisis. They were in no shape to help anyone. And this is where it gets wild. While Pakistan is basically begging the IMF for bailouts, dealing with insane inflation, India spots a huge opportunity. In their 2022 budget, they set aside millions of dollars in aid specifically for Afghanistan. They just walked right into the vacuum that Pakistan left behind. And this led to a complete 180-degree flip. The Taliban, who had been anti-India for decades, started openly praising New Delhi. At the same time, they were publicly trashing Pakistan, complaining about getting poor quality wheat from them. It's incredible. Yesterday's allies were now bitter rivals, and old enemies were suddenly talking.
Okay, so this brings us right back to our central mystery. Now look, there's no smoking gun, no public, concrete proof that India is directly involved in this border war. But there's this trail of circumstantial evidence, and it really suggests that a hidden hand is playing this game, and playing it very, very well. India's playbook here was smart. They never officially recognized the Taliban government. No way. Instead, they played it pragmatically. They sent tons of humanitarian aid. We're talking wheat, medicine, COVID vaccines. But at the same time, they were holding these secret back-channel talks and even let the Taliban run consulates in places like Mumbai and Hyderabad. It's a classic soft power play.
But here it is, probably the most explosive piece of the puzzle. This comes from a former commander of the TTP. Remember, that's the group at war with Pakistan. And he's on the record saying, yeah, his group developed a relationship with India, that they got financial help from them, and that they charged a price for every attack. And now you have Pakistani officials and even some US intelligence reports alleging that India is running covert ops inside Pakistan. And get this, they're supposedly using the very same militant networks the ISI created, but now to hunt down India's enemies. I mean, the irony there is just off the charts. Look, the full truth about these secret operations, we probably won't know for decades, if we ever do. But one thing is crystal clear. The more that Pakistan and Afghanistan fight, the bigger India's strategic advantage gets. And in the world of geopolitics, you don't just wait for an advantage to fall into your lap. You create it. And more often than not, that means the biggest, most important moves are the ones happening in the shadows, the ones we never see.